The Kra'Vazh mothership loomed over Earth like a physical manifestation of doom, its obsidian surface consuming the light of the sun rather than reflecting it. James Morrison watched from the observation deck of Luna Base 1 as the alien vessel's shadow crawled across North America. At 53, Morrison had spent his career studying theoretical cosmic sociology, trying to predict how alien civilizations might behave. Now, facing the real thing, all his theories seemed hopelessly naive. "They're beginning atmospheric entry," said Technical Director Evans, her voice flat with exhaustion. "Multiple craft spreading globally." Morrison nodded. "How many?" "Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands." The observation deck screens displayed real-time footage from Earth's surface. The Kra'Vazh descent pods pierced through cloud layers like obsidian raindrops, each one carrying what Earth scientists had come to call monitors. 8-foot-tall bipedal creatures with exoskeletons that seemed to bend light around them. The first contact had been 6 months ago. The Kra'Vazh emerged from a wormhole near Jupiter with technology centuries beyond human capability. They didn't attack immediately. Instead, they studied, observed, established outposts on Mars, sent probes throughout the solar system. When they finally approached Earth, they came with a simple message delivered in perfect English. "We claim this system as part of the Kra'Vazh Dominion. Resistance is inefficient. Accept monitoring and resource allocation guidelines for optimal integration." The United Earth government had attempted negotiation. The aliens responded by neutralizing every military satellite in orbit within 17 minutes. A demonstration, they called it. "Morrison, they've established their primary node in New Alexandria," Evans said, pointing to the sprawling domed city that had once been Earth's scientific crown jewel. The feed showed monitors methodically establishing perimeters around research facilities. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical. Humans were being herded into processing lines. "Magnify Quadrant 7, Morrison instructed. The image zoomed in on a young man, perhaps 25, being roughly pushed by a monitor. The alien's exoskeleton rippled with bioluminescent patterns as it communicated with others. "That's my son's lab," Morrison whispered. "Thomas was working on quantum consciousness interfaces there." "I'm sorry, James." Evans placed a hand on his shoulder. The young man on screen, not Thomas but one of his colleagues, suddenly broke from the line, running toward what appeared to be an emergency exit. The monitor pursuing him moved with frightening speed, extending an appendage that released a pulse of energy. The man collapsed, his body convulsing before going terribly still. "Life sign terminated," the AI assistant announced clinically. Morrison's fingers dug into the console edge. "They didn't need to do that. The Kra'Vazh operate on pure efficiency," Evans said. "Their sociological profile suggests they view resistance as a system error to be eliminated rather than subdued." "Have they responded to the president's latest communication?" Evans laughed bitterly. "They said, and I quote, 'Your hierarchical leadership structure has been analyzed and found obsolete. New management protocols will be implemented.'" The feeds continued to show similar scenes worldwide. Monitors establishing control centers at strategic locations, energy grids, communication hubs, research facilities, water treatment plants. Humans who complied were processed, tagged with some kind of neural interface, and released. Those who resisted vanished into Kra'Vazh vessels. "What are they after?" Morrison muttered, more to himself than to Evans. "They've got the technology to harvest resources from uninhabited systems." "Why here? Why us?" "Maybe we're the resource," Evans suggested darkly. A new alert flashed across the screens. The Kra'Vazh had surrounded the Prometheus complex, humanity's most advanced quantum computing facility. "Thomas," Morrison breathed. His son had transferred there 3 weeks ago. The footage showed hundreds of researchers being lined up outside the facility. The monitors moved among them, scanning each person with devices that emitted a soft blue light. Most were then directed to processing stations. A small number were separated into a different group. Morrison recognized his son immediately, tall like him but with his mother's auburn hair. Thomas stood rigid as a monitor scanned him. The device flashed red. The monitor paused, then scanned him again. Same result. A second monitor approached, then a third, all scanning Thomas with increasing frequencies. "What's happening?" Evans leaned forward. "I don't know." Morrison's heart hammered against his ribs. "The pattern doesn't match anything we've seen." On screen, Thomas was taken aside. away from both groups. A larger monitor approached, its exoskeleton more ornate, suggesting higher rank. It extended what appeared to be a communication appendage toward Thomas's forehead. Thomas didn't flinch. Instead, he spoke directly to the creature. The audio was too distant to capture his words, but the monitor physically recoiled. It made a series of rapid gestures to the others, who immediately surrounded Thomas. "Get me audio," Morrison shouted. Evans worked the controls frantically, attempting to boost and filter. The sound came through broken and static-filled, but Thomas's voice was unmistakable. "Already mapped your neural pathways. We've been waiting for you." For centuries. The monitor's response came as a series of clicks and oscillating tones that the translation software struggled with. "Impossible. Your species is primitive. Classification, resource labor viable. Technological capacity, minimal." Thomas smiled then, a chilling expression devoid of humor. "You assessed our visible technology, our public capabilities. That was your first mistake. Technological concealment is inefficient," the monitor replied. "Not when you've been expecting predators," Thomas said calmly. "Humans have a long history of being underestimated. We prepare for worst-case scenarios. We've had contingencies for your arrival since before we reached Mars." The lead monitor stepped closer. "Your weapons have been neutralized." "Who said anything about weapons?" Thomas raised his hand slightly, revealing what looked like an ordinary wristwatch. "This is an activation key, not for a weapon, for an awakening." Morrison's breath caught. The Quantum Consciousness Project. That's what Thomas was working on. "What does that mean?" Evans asked. "It means we've been playing dead," Morrison whispered, as understanding dawned. "Like the possums in my backyard when predators come." On screen, Thomas pressed something on his wrist device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then simultaneously across every feed from Earth, pinpricks of blue light began to emerge from homes, research facilities, even seemingly abandoned buildings. The monitor facing Thomas staggered backward. "What is this signal?" "It penetrates our shielding." "That's not a signal," Thomas replied, his voice now coming through clearly as if someone had boosted the transmission. "That's human consciousness, unified through quantum entanglement. We call it the..." Suddenly, every piece of Kra'Vazh technology on Earth flickered. Their monitors, weapons, communication devices, all momentarily disrupted. The monitors themselves seemed to shudder, their exoskeletons rippling in what might have been pain. "Impossible," the lead monitor's translation came through. "Your neural complexity is insufficient for such integration." Thomas laughed, a sound that made Morrison's spine tingle with both pride and fear. "That's the thing about humans. We've always been more than the sum of our parts. You saw individuals, separate, weak creatures to be dominated." The blue lights grew brighter across all feeds. Humans worldwide stood straighter, their eyes taking on the same azure glow. Even those who had been tagged with Kra'Vazh neural interfaces were transforming, the alien technology being overwhelmed by something more fundamental. "What you failed to understand," Thomas continued, his voice echoing now through every transmission as if speaking from thousands of mouths, simultaneously, is that consciousness itself is the most powerful force in the universe when properly harnessed. And humans, with our art, our music, our stories, our emotions, have been cultivating consciousness in ways your efficiency-driven minds cannot comprehend." The lead monitor raised what appeared to be a weapon. "This rebellion will be suppressed." Thomas didn't move as the alien took aim. "You thought we were weak because we feel, because we dream, because we love and grieve and hope." His eyes blazed blue now, his voice resonating with countless others in perfect harmony. "That was your final mistake." The weapon in the monitor's hand dissolved into particles of light. "We are not merely what you see," the unified voice of humanity declared through Thomas and countless others. "We are what you failed to perceive." On Luna Base 1, Morrison watched as the blue light spread like a wave across Earth, moving toward the Kra'Vazh mothership in orbit. The beginning of a resistance no one, not even he, could have predicted. "They thought we were weak," he whispered. They were dead wrong. High Commander Kra'Vazh stood motionless on the control deck of the Kra'Vazh mothership, his four primary eyes fixed on the holographic displays surrounding him. Earth-designated acquisition target 73T9 was being enveloped in a network of blue light that defied all established scientific principles. "Explain," he demanded of the chief analyst, his voice modulated to express maximum authority. The chief analyst's exoskeleton pulsed with stress patterns. Unknown, High Commander. The phenomenon appears to be spreading through quantum channels we cannot detect until activated. Our monitors are experiencing unprecedented neural feedback. Impossible. Kra'Vazh's secondary appendages twitched in irritation. Their technological assessment rated at barely level 3. Nothing in their infrastructure suggested quantum consciousness capabilities. That is correct, High Commander. We found no evidence. Then find it now. Kra'Vazh's carapace flared, silencing the subordinate. Dispatch containment units to all primary nodes. Activate the suppression field. On the planet below, Thomas Morrison felt the Kra'Vazh response as a pressure wave attempting to disrupt the mesh humanity's hidden quantum consciousness network. Around him, the monitors were retreating, their coordinated movements now jerky and uncertain. The air crackled with energy as suppression fields activated from the Kra'Vazh vessels hovering above major cities. They're trying to isolate the nodes. Thomas communicated through the mesh to the billions of connected minds. Exactly as we predicted. Dr. Alexandra Wright, coordinating from a subterranean facility beneath the Antarctic ice shelf, responded instantly, initiating Protocol Hydra, decentralizing primary nodes. Throughout the planet, ordinary-seeming humans, teachers, farmers, children, elderly, became anchor points in the mesh. The network that had been decades in secret development responded by distributing its load across more minds, making it impossible to target. On Luna Base 1, James Morrison watched in awe as the blue network reconfigured itself faster than the Kra'Vazh could respond. "Evans," he whispered. "Are you seeing this?" She nodded, eyes wide. "The mesh is adapting. It's learning." "Not just learning," Morrison said. "Remember what Thomas told me about the project? The quantum consciousness interface doesn't create a network. It reveals one that was always there. Human consciousness has always been connected. We just couldn't access it. But why now? Why didn't we use this when they first arrived?" Morrison's eyes never left the screens. "Because we needed them to believe we were helpless, to underestimate us completely." In New Alexandria, Sarah Walker, a pianist who had been performing when the invasion began, stood in the middle of a street now abandoned by retreating monitors. Her hands, which had created music for decades, now shaped something far more profound as she served as a local anchor for the mesh. Near her, a monitor lay immobilized, its exoskeleton twitching as the quantum field interfered with its neural pathways. Sarah approached it slowly. "You studied our weapons, our visible technology," she said, kneeling beside the alien. "But did you study our music? Our art? The ways humans encode information and culture?" The monitor's translation device sputtered, "Aesthetic, irrelevant to conquest assessment." Sarah smiled. "That's where you made your critical error. The patterns in Bach's fugues, in Van Gogh's Starry Night, in the mathematical sequences we embedded in our oldest architecture, they weren't just expressions. They were preparations. Preparations? For what? For creating conscious technology that wouldn't be recognized as technology." She placed her hand on the ground. "For 300 years we've been encoding quantum entanglement patterns into everything we create, building a parallel infrastructure invisible to conventional scanning. On the mothership, alarms blared as systems began failing in cascading sequence. Our neural interfaces with the planet's infrastructure are being severed," reported the operations officer. "The humans are reclaiming their systems, but not through conventional countermeasures." Kra'Vazh stalked to the main viewing portal, his gaze fixed on the blue web now clearly visible even from orbit. "How are they bypassing our encryption?" "They're not decrypting our codes," the chief analyst replied, mandibles clicking nervously. "They're communicating directly with the underlying quantum states of our technology." "Impossible. Our technology operates on principles beyond their comprehension." "Evidence suggests otherwise, High Commander." The analyst's exoskeleton pulsed with fear patterns. "We may have critically miscalculated." Kra'Vazh turned sharply. "Explain." "Our assessment protocols focus on detecting artificial computation and energy weapons. We measure advancement by infrastructure size, energy output, and resource manipulation." The analyst paused. "We never considered consciousness itself as a technological vector, because it is inefficient." Kra'Vazh hissed. "No species has successfully weaponized consciousness. The energy requirements alone." Would be prohibitive using our methods, the analyst finished. But humans appear to have developed along an entirely different technological path, one emphasizing neural efficiency over physical infrastructure. In the Prometheus complex, Thomas led a group of scientists through hallways now cleared of monitors. Their destination, the facility's quantum core, which the Kra'Vazh had attempted to co-opt for their own use. They tried to interface with our quantum systems using their technology, Thomas explained through the mesh. But our systems were designed to respond to consciousness patterns, not external commands. Dr. Eliza Harmon, a quantum physicist who had helped design the core, nodded. The more they tried to connect to our systems, the more access they unwittingly gave us to theirs. Every neural interface they established became a two-way door. In the central chamber, they found what they were looking for: a Kra'Vazh command node, its crystalline structure pulsing with data. Thomas approached it, placing his hand on its surface. "They're mobilizing their fleet," he announced, his consciousness extending through the connection, preparing to bombard major mesh nodes from orbit. Dr. Harmon smiled grimly. "Let them try." On Luna Base 1, Morrison and Evans received the alert simultaneously. "The Kra'Vazh are positioning for orbital strikes," Evans said. "Without Earth's defensive grid, we don't need it," Morrison interrupted, pointing to new data flowing across their screens. "Look, throughout the solar system, previously dormant satellites and research probes were activating, hundreds of them, built and launched over decades under the guise of scientific missions. Operation Firefly," Morrison whispered. "The quantum consciousness network extends beyond Earth. We've had nano-quantum relays throughout the system for years. The screens showed the impossible, the moons of Jupiter glowing with the same blue light now enveloping Earth as hidden human outposts. Activated." Ezravash's composure finally broke as reports flooded in. "Quantum disturbances detected on Mars outposts. IO research station not responding. Fleet command nodes experiencing neural interface disruption." "How?" he demanded. "Their space presence was minimal. Primitive. They barely established a functional lunar base." The chief analyst's response was interrupted by a new presence on the command deck. A holographic projection of a human female, her form comprised of blue light. "You're wondering how you could have missed it," said Dr. Alexandra Wright's projection. "The answer is simple. Your species has evolved to prioritize efficiency and direct power. You value what can be measured in energy output and resource accumulation." Kra'Vazh's weapon arm extended automatically, though he knew it was useless against a hologram. "Identify yourself. I am humanity," the projection replied. One voice of billions in the mesh. "What you're experiencing isn't a weapon we created. It's what we have always been. Impossible. No species evolves with inherent quantum connectivity. Not inherent. Developed. While your civilization evolved toward external technology, ours developed in two parallel paths: the visible infrastructure you detected and dismissed, and the invisible network of consciousness we cultivated through art, music, literature, and shared experience." The hologram expanded, showing the full solar system with blue connections forming between planets, moons, and seemingly empty space. "For centuries, we suspected we weren't alone. We prepared not just with weapons, but with a different kind of defense. One based on consciousness itself. Every human child born in the last 100 years has been subtly trained to participate in quantum neural networking disguised as educational games. Every piece of art created contained patterns that strengthened our collective unconscious connection." Kra'Vazh felt something he had never experienced before. A sensation the humans would call fear. "What do you want?" "We want you to understand what you've awakened," the hologram replied. "You saw our physical weapons and neutralized them. You saw our visible infrastructure and controlled it. But you never saw us, the consciousness that pervades everything we create." Throughout the mothership, systems continued failing as the blue energy infiltrated deeper. Kra'Vazh crew members reported strange sensations, alien thoughts, and emotions bleeding into their highly ordered minds. "You're inside our neural pathways," Zorvash realized with horror. "We're sharing consciousness," the hologram corrected. "Something your species has forgotten how to do in your pursuit of efficiency. Your mistake wasn't invading Earth, it was assuming that consciousness can be measured by infrastructure." On the lower decks, monitors were collapsing, overwhelmed by the flood of human consciousness. Not attacked, connected. Their rigidly structured minds exposed for the first time to the chaotic, creative, emotional thought patterns of billions of humans. Stop this, Kra'Vazh demanded, feeling his own neural pathways beginning to resonate with the invasion. We can't stop being what we are, the hologram replied, but we can teach you to understand it. Your species once had what we have, before you engineered it away in pursuit of perfect efficiency. On Earth, Thomas directed the mesh's expansion with practiced skill. The Kra'Vazh had expected resistance in the form of weapons, of violence. The direct opposition they understood. Instead, humanity had responded by simply including them in something they couldn't comprehend. A shared consciousness that valued diversity over uniformity, creativity over efficiency, connection over domination. Their ship is trying to generate a quantum isolation field, Dr. Harmon reported. They're attempting to sever their neural connection to the mesh. Thomas nodded. Let them try. They don't understand that once consciousness has been shared, it can never be fully separated again. In his command chamber, Kra'Vazh felt his neural pathways burning with alien sensations, emotions he had no reference for, memories that weren't his, ideas that contradicted all Kra'Vazh doctrine. His orderly mind was being infected with human chaos, with hope, fear, love, wonder, doubt. Full retreat, he ordered, his voice trembling. Disconnect all planetary interfaces. Abort the acquisition. But as the order transmitted, he knew it was already too late. The blue light had penetrated every system, every mind. The devastating truth became clear. The Kra'Vazh hadn't discovered a primitive species ready for harvesting. They had awakened something ancient and powerful that had been patiently waiting, a form of advancement so fundamentally different from their own that they had failed to recognize it until it was too late. For the first time in his existence, Kra'Vazh felt genuine terror, not of weapons or death, but of transformation, of becoming something other than what he had always been. We are not merely what you see, echoed the voices of humanity in his mind. We are what you failed to perceive. And Kra'Vazh finally understood the true meaning of power. The Kra'Vazh mothership shuddered as another wave of quantum consciousness penetrated its defenses. On the command deck, Kra'Vazh fought to maintain neural cohesion while his officers collapsed around him, overwhelmed by the flood of human thought patterns, infiltrating their structured minds. Purge all systems, he ordered, voice breaking with unfamiliar emotional distortions. Sever connections to the human network, but there was no response. His crew lay incapacitated, their exoskeletons pulsing with chaotic light patterns reflecting the human consciousness now intermingling with their own. Kra'Vazh stood alone, the last functional command node in an increasingly dysfunctional system. Fascinating, said a voice behind him. Kra'Vazh turned to find Thomas Morrison standing on the command deck, not as a hologram, but physically present. Impossible, yet undeniable. How are you here? Kra'Vazh demanded. Weapon appendage extended despite its uselessness against whatever this human had become. Thomas walked calmly around the command center, studying the alien technology with curious eyes. Quantum entanglement allows consciousness to travel instantaneously across space. Once we mapped your neural pathways, projecting a physical manifestation through your own sensory apparatus was relatively simple. You're not really here, Kra'Vazh realized. This is a neurological attack, Thomas smiled. No, it's a conversation. One your kind should have initiated before attempting conquest. Around them, the command deck began transforming as the mesh's influence spread deeper into the ship's systems. Crystalline structures that had been rigid and geometric began flowing into more organic patterns. Displays showing tactical information shifted to reveal complex webs of interconnection between stars, planets, and the consciousness inhabiting them. What are you doing to my ship? Kra'Vazh demanded. Not me. Us. All of us. Thomas gestured and the walls seemed to dissolve, revealing Earth below, now a brilliant blue sphere pulsing with networked consciousness. Your ship is being repurposed by the collective creativity of billions of human minds. We're not destroying it. We're reimagining it. On Earth, James Morrison watched from Luna Base 1 as the massive Kra'Vazh vessel began to transform. Its obsidian surface, once light-absorbing and ominous, now rippled with patterns of luminescence that matched the global network below. It's beautiful, Evans whispered beside him. Morrison nodded, eyes fixed on the transformation. Thomas explained it to me once. He said the quantum consciousness project wasn't about creating a weapon. It was about remembering what we've always been. What did he mean? That consciousness itself is the most fundamental force in the universe. More basic than gravity or electromagnetism, every living thing participates in it, but most species forget as they evolve toward technological complexity. The screen showed Kra'Vazh across the planet, no longer attacking or retreating, but simply standing motionless as their neural pathways synchronized with the human mesh. Not conquered, connect. It's not an invasion of their minds, Morrison explained. It's an invitation to remember something their species forgot long ago. In the Prometheus complex, Dr. Eliza Harmon monitored the quantum core as it processed data at unprecedented rates. The patterns she observed weren't conquest or defense. They were translation. The fundamental language of consciousness being shared between two vastly different species. They engineered emotion out of their neural architecture, she told her colleagues, as the data revealed the Kra'Vazh evolutionary history. 5,000 years ago, they decided that feelings were inefficient, that art was a waste of resources, that imagination diverted energy from more practical applications. They made themselves into living machines. A colleague responded. Harmon nodded, and then forgot they had ever been anything else. On the mothership, Kra'Vazh struggled to process the flood of images now coursing through his neural pathways. Memories that weren't his, yet somehow were emotions he had never experienced, yet recognized at some primal level. "What is this?" he demanded. Mandibles quivering as unfamiliar sensations overwhelmed his carefully structured mind. "Your species' history," Thomas replied. "Before the Great Enhancement, as you called it. Before your ancestors decided that efficiency was the only value worth preserving. The images intensified. Kra'Vazh in ancient times, creating intricate art, singing complex harmonies, sharing experiences through neural connection that valued diversity rather than conformity. A species that once celebrated imagination, now reduced to calculating conquest. Lies." Kra'Vazh hissed. "Neurological manipulation. No. Memory." Thomas approached, his form becoming more solid as the ship's systems integrated further with the mesh. "Your species and mine evolved along mirrored paths. While you began with neural connection and engineered it away in pursuit of efficiency, we began separated and spent millennia building connection through art, music, shared stories, the very things you dismissed as irrelevant to conquest assessment. Around them, the command deck continued its transformation, the hierarchical arrangement giving way to a circular configuration where information flowed equally to all points. You weren't invading Earth," Thomas said softly. "You were coming home to the very thing your ancestors abandoned. Not to consciousness as technology, but consciousness as reality." Kra'Vazh felt his exoskeleton crack slightly as something long suppressed fought to emerge. Why would they abandon connection? For the same reason many humans fear it. Because true connection requires vulnerability. Your ancestors chose certainty over possibility, efficiency over creativity, isolation over the messy complexity of shared experience. The images flowing through Kra'Vazh's mind accelerated, showing him the parallel evolution of Earth humans struggling over millennia to develop the very neural connection his species had engineered away. The cosmic irony was devastating. While the Kra'Vazh had evolved toward increasing isolation disguised as advancement, humans had been painstakingly rebuilding the neural connection the Kra'Vazh had sacrificed. "We knew you were coming," Thomas continued. "Not you specifically, but something like you. Species that forget connection inevitably seek to conquer rather than commune. 300 years ago, our quantum physicists discovered consciousness imprints in the fabric of space. Echoes of species that had evolved similar technologies. We realized we weren't the first to discover quantum consciousness, just the first to develop it without sacrificing our emotions, our art, our messy diversity of experience." "Inefficient," Kra'Vazh managed, though the word felt increasingly hollow. "Is it?" Thomas gestured, and the chamber filled with representations of Earth's history. Cave paintings, giving way to symphonies, mathematical proofs alongside poetry, the chaotic beauty of billions of minds creating rather than merely calculating. Your efficiency brought you to conquest. Our inefficiency brought us to connection. Which path truly advanced further? Something cracked deep in Kra'Vazh's neural architecture, not broken but awakened. Memories stored in the quantum level of his DNA surged forward. Ancestral experiences before the great enhancement when the Kra'Vazh II had created, had felt, had connected. "We forgot," he whispered, his voice modulation failing as emotion. True emotion returned for the first time in millennia of evolutionary engineering. "Yes," Thomas said simply. "And now you remember." Throughout the solar system, the Kra'Vazh fleet hung motionless as the wave of awareness spread from ship to ship, not conquered by human consciousness but transformed by reconnection to their own suppressed neural heritage. On Mars, Kra'Vazh outposts that had been preparation points for Earth's subjugation became joining nodes in the expanding network. The aliens who had arrived as conquerors found themselves participants in the very thing their ancestors had engineered away: the messy, inefficient, gloriously complex experience of shared consciousness. From Luna Base 1, Morrison and Evans watched as the blue network extended beyond Earth, beyond the solar system, pulsing outward along quantum channels toward distance. "What's happening now?" Evans asked. Morrison's eyes widened as the data became clear. "It's not just connecting to the Kra'Vazh, it's connecting through them to other species, other worlds." He turned to her, face alight with wonder. "The Kra'Vazh aren't the first species to evolve this way. There are others, dozens, maybe hundreds of civilizations that developed along similar paths. Advanced species that engineered away their own consciousness? Yes. And now they're remembering." The Prometheus complex buzzed with activity as scientists processed the flood of information now streaming through the quantum core. Dr. Harmon stood at the center, directing the analysis of what had become the most important scientific discovery in human history. "The Kra'Vazh weren't invaders," she announced to the gathered researchers. "They were catalysts. Their arrival activated the final phase of the quantum consciousness network, allowing it to extend beyond our solar system." On the main display, a map of the galaxy revealed pulsing nodes of light, civilizations being reconnected to a network of consciousness that had lain dormant for millennia. Not a human network, but a universal one that all sentient life participated in before technological evolution led many species to engineer it away. "We weren't building a new technology," Harmon explained, voice hushed with awe. "We were remembering an ancient one. The quantum consciousness network isn't human, it's universal. The birthright of all sentient life." On the transformed mothership, now hovering in peaceful orbit above Earth, Zarvash stood with Thomas at what had once been a tactical display but now showed the spreading wave of reconnection. "We came to conquer worlds," Zarvash said, his voice now rich with emotion his species had forgotten how to express. "Instead, we've awakened galaxies." "Not awakened," Thomas corrected gently. "Reminded. This is the great cycle the ancient records spoke of. Every few millennia, species evolve to the point where they either engineer consciousness away in pursuit of efficiency or expand it through creativity and connection. Those who choose efficiency eventually seek resources through conquest. Those who choose connection eventually reunite the separated." Zorvash finished. "Understanding at last. My ancestors believed they were advancing by removing emotion, by standardizing thought, by prioritizing calculation over creation. They didn't realize they were severing their connection to the most fundamental aspect of existence." Thomas nodded. "The same temptation faces every technological species. The illusion that measurement is more real than experience, that calculation is more advanced than creation, that efficiency is more powerful than connection." Around them, the ship continued its metamorphosis, not into a human vessel, but into something neither species would have created alone. A physical manifestation of consciousness, shared rather than imposed. "What happens now?" Zorvash asked, experiencing for the first time in his existence the uncertainty of true possibility. Thomas smiled. "To now? Creation? Connection? Communion? The very things your ancestors sacrificed in pursuit of perfect efficiency. The very things that make consciousness worth sharing." 1 year later, James Morrison stood on the observation deck of what had once been Luna Base 1, but was now the first nexus of what humans had come to call the communion. Beside him stood his son Thomas and, more surprisingly, Zorvash, now the Kra'Vazh representative to the emerging galactic community. "The 23rd world joined the network yesterday," Thomas reported. "A species that engineered away neural connection 9,000 years ago. They're experiencing emotion for the first time in their recorded history." "How are they handling it?" Morrison asked. Kra'Vazh's exoskeleton, now flowing with expressiveness that would have been considered a malfunction a year ago, pulsed with what humans had learned to recognize as amazement. As we did. Terror, then wonder, then gratitude. The journey from calculation back to creation is always difficult, but always worth the pain of remembering. Below them, Earth glowed with the blue light of active quantum consciousness. Not always visible, but never again dormant. The Kra'Vazh fleet that had come to conquer now orbited peacefully, transformed into connection nodes, linking Earth to a network of awakening worlds. We thought we came to claim resources, Zorvash said reflectively. We didn't understand that consciousness itself is the only resource that matters. Everything else is just substrate. Morrison nodded. The greatest irony is that both our species were seeking the same thing all along. You through conquest, us through creation. Both paths leading to the same destination. Not the same, Thomas corrected. Your path led to the elimination of diversity, ours to its cultivation. The network requires both structure and creativity to function. The very balance your ancestors displaced. Exervash's appendages formed the gesture his species now use to acknowledge truth. The greatest efficiency we've discovered is not in elimination of difference, but in its orchestration. Not in conquest, but in communion. As they spoke, a new alert appeared. Another world awakening to the network. Another species remembering what it had engineered away. Another civilization discovering that what they had dismissed as weakness, emotion, creativity, the inefficient beauty of diverse experience was actually the foundation of the most powerful force in the universe. They thought we were weak, Morrison said, echoing the words that had become something of a mantra for this new era. They were dead wrong. No, Zorvash responded, his voice resonating with the wisdom his species was relearning. We thought strength meant domination, when true power has always been found in connection. We were not wrong about your weakness. We were wrong about the nature of strength itself. Thomas smiled as the blue light pulsed around them, connecting worlds that had forgotten they were never truly separate. In the end, the universe doesn't belong to those who conquer or those who calculate. It belongs to those who remember that consciousness itself is not a tool to be engineered, but the very fabric of existence to be experienced. And across the galaxy, species that had evolved along divergent paths found themselves converging once again on the ancient truth that had awaited them all. That no civilization rises by standing alone, and that the greatest power in the universe is not the ability to dominate, but the courage to connect.